Well, as protests around the world continue on, so does the need for safe protesting amid this pandemic. Here to talk about how to protest as safely as possible is infectious disease physician Dr. Cassandra Pierre. Dr. Pierre, thanks so much for being with us, and just give us a sense of what your thoughts are first on the significance of these protests and then the risks they present in these times.
Absolutely. The protests are profoundly significant. The protesters are calling for an end to systemic racism, and there is a lot of justified frustration and disbelief in the ongoing cycles of oppression and violence in marginalized communities, especially Black communities. There is this compelling need to be present and to be visible as steadfast against police brutality, not just in Black communities, but in society as a whole. We've seen images of people across generations, races, and ethnicities participating in these protests. And it is an incredibly important method of advocating for and enacting social change. However, there is no doubt that there is real risk. Standing shoulder to shoulder with others who are shouting, singing, talking, and emitting other forms of respiratory droplets, even if masked, is unfortunately, very efficient way of transmitting COVID-19 from person to person. And it's especially of concern in communities of color who have already been ravaged by COVID-19 related infections and deaths, as well as disproportionately being infected, of course, by police brutality. And so medical professionals and public health authorities have been largely supportive of these protests, but also very concerned about what it could mean in a few weeks in terms of rising rates of COVID-19 in communities where there have been protests. So I think it's very important at this point to just get the message out, to continue to reiterate that COVID-19 presents a risk for destabilizing communities of color.
Yeah, it's so important to remember. And of course, you're the perfect person to be talking to, Dr. Pierre. Can you give us some tips on how to safely protest in the middle of a pandemic?
Absolutely. So this might sound cliche, but we know that masks are an incredibly important method to protect yourself as well as to protect those standing around you. The best mask to wear, if you have access to it, would be a surgical mask because of the multiple layers present, which can better filter out particles in the air, including respiratory pathogens like COVID-19. But a cloth mask is just fine if you don't have access to a surgical mask. So please wear masks. The other thing to consider that we know about would be good hand hygiene. So carrying sanitizer with you to wash your hands so that you're not carrying any virus that's present in the environment to your eyes or your mouth or other places on your face that might pose infection. One thing that hasn't been discussed as much has been considering eye protection. So we know that the virus can also, especially in close quarters, come in through the portal of the eyes as well. And in the hospital setting, we use face masks, or face shields rather. But in the community, we haven't promoted this as much because physical distancing has been much more important. And when you have physical distancing, you don't need to worry as much about eye protection. In this setting, where people are close together, we do want to let people know that they may consider using eye protection such as ski or swim goggles. And if they don't have access to goggles, sunglasses might be your next best option, especially those that wrap around the sides. Other things to consider would be traveling in a group of people that you know, whether you've quarantined together or just have each other's information, such that if one of you becomes ill, you can alert the others in your group to consider self-quarantining. And by putting yourself in that bubble of people that you may know or may self-quarantine, you may also reduce your risk of infection. And lastly, of course, something that we know very well is physical distancing. We want to continue to recommend that people remain 6 feet apart. However, there is research that does suggest social distancing or physically distancing as little as 3 feet does also significantly reduce the risk of transmission of virus. So physically distancing yourself as much as possible when you're in the center of a protest is also very helpful and continues to be so.
All right, so much important information for people who I know are trying to make such a big difference in this world. Thank you so much, Dr. Pierre, for your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.